tragedy in the Alps. A German economy airline owned by Lufthansa being co-piloted by a fellow who was apparently very, very troubled, being crashed into a mountainside. I don't think there's a lot of dispute now but that this was basically like we've seen across the United States with these mass killings, a suicide associated with a mass murder. It's like, going out in a blaze of glory. And we've had this conversation before about, what is unique about this? Why are we seeing this now? We haven't seen this in thousands of years. Dr. Peter Breggin is with us. He's a practicing psychiatrist. He's the author of numerous articles and books, including Medication Madness, the Role of Psychiatric Drugs in Cases of Violence, Suicide, and Crime. His most recent book is Guilt, Shame, and Anxiety, Understanding and Overcoming Negative Emotions. Dr. Breggin, welcome back to the program.
Well, I'm so glad to be with you. You're always on top of this ahead of most folks, and your characterization is exact. This is so familiar now from what's going on in the USA for quite a while now with the Colorado shootings, both Columbine and Aurora, and other tragedies like this around the country that have usually involved antidepressants, either at the time or shortly before. And in Medication Madness, I point out that the most common combination I see for violence is the antidepressants plus the benzos. And Tom, as of this morning, we have reports that he was on both a benzo and on a new antidepressant.
Okay, so just for people who don't know what we're talking about, the benzodiazepine drugs, these are, Valium is probably the most famous of these. Some of them are sleeping drugs, some of them are Xanax, some of them are anti-anxiety drugs. And then the antidepressants you're talking about, are you talking about selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors,
no, this
the
is
SSRIs?
A new one.
This is a new one.
Okay. Give it a little description. Your point about benzos, thank you for helping with that. And this particular one is another well-known one, Ativan, or lorazepam, and it has a big warning, FDA warning, not approved for depression. That's very unusual to have a warning like that because this drug is known to worsen depression and worsen the suicide risk.
Right.
So right off the bat, you've got this apparently very depressed person getting a drug right now that worsens depression and in general any physician would not want to give. These drugs cause disinhibition, somewhat like alcohol, so that can lead to violence and mania. There's a recent report that he may have been in a car accident that caused his eye problems. If so, if he has a head injury, then all the psych drugs, but I think in particular these sedative benzodiazepines will add to the disinhibition. Right. So we've got a whole bunch of things coming together in regard to the Ativan. Now it's been reported this morning that he was taking agomelatine, Agomelatine.
I've never heard of it.
Well, it was disapproved in the U.S. for sloppy testing and ineffectiveness. It is a drug that aims at increasing the effect of melatonin, but it also does affect, to some extent, the serotonin, one of the serotonin subtypes. It's going to be hard to predict what those effects are. Some of the adverse effects listed look like SSRIs, uncommon effects. That means less than 1 in 100, agitation, irritability, restlessness, aggression. Nightmares, abnormal dreams, things that are called uncommon at this early stage of a new drug often turn out to be its basic profile. Right. So we've got this stimulant or activation profile that is associated with violence. And we also know this was a very disturbed, distressed young man. And young men are particularly susceptible to the adverse effects of psychiatric drugs. This is a man who was getting injections of Abilify, an antipsychotic drug. So somebody thought he really needed the strongest, most toxic agents available.
How did he get it in an airplane cockpit after all of this?
Isn't that an incredible question? And, of course, I don't have the answer for it. I can tell you that, like in the U.S., it seems that the checkups these people get annually are purely physical, and then you rely on the disclosure of the patient to the medical doc, who's not a psychologist or psychiatrist. You rely on him to tell you whether or not he's disturbed. So
I thought pilots were drug tested. I mean, if they're going to drug test welfare recipients, which makes no sense to me at all, I could at least understand a rationale for drug testing pilots.
Oh, as much as I'm a libertarian, I'm for drug testing pilots. There's no evidence that they're drug testing pilots.
Oh my!
Even in the U.S., I believe that it's the word of the pilot. And you probably don't know this. I was actually a consultant to the FAA, the Federal Aviation Agency, on a particular case back in around 2000 because a pilot wanted to take an antidepressant and keep his license, and they asked me to help them present evidence, which I did, working with a lot of different scientific sources. I presented the evidence, said, no, of course you don't want a pilot taking an antidepressant drug. And then 10 years afterward, in 2010, our FDA now allows you to take one of 4 antidepressants, some of the worst of them, Zoloft, Celexa, Lexapro, allows you to take these under special circumstances and special approval. But it tells you how much the drug companies control what goes on. Because between 2010, when the FAA, Federal Aviation Agency, wanted my help in keeping pilots off of these drugs, and 2010, when they changed their mind, we had more and more evidence. In fact, in 2010, an article by Tom Moore and several other good researchers came out showing a higher reporting rate to the FDA for violence precisely on these drugs. So we've got a lot of data. Benzos can cause violence, especially they can worsen depression. And again, the benzos being these tranquilizing drugs, in this case Ativan, and antidepressants. And this drug seems to have an antidepressant profile of agitation, irritability, and restlessness, aggression. And
we have just a minute left, Dr. Breggin. My understanding also is that the drugs that mess with serotonin can cause people to lose empathy, to start viewing other people not as human beings but as objects. Does that make it easier to kill a bunch of people?
Yeah, you're really on top of this stuff. I just don't have the data about whether this particular drug, this AGO melantine, is going to be doing that, but I would not be surprised.
Because
certainly it's dampening overall emotional awareness. They just showed that in animal studies.
Right.
So,
So he would be less likely to think of the people. He would be less likely to think of the people on the plane as actual human beings with actual human lives, but rather just as statistics or bodies or a headline or something.
Or objects to inflict his anger upon.
Correct. Yeah. Remarkable. These tragedies continue, and it's astonishing to me, Dr. Breggin, that this conversation that you and I are having is not, by and large, being had in the national media. And I think that's a testimonial to the power of the drug industry as well, and all the money that they give to the corporate media. Dr. Peter Breggin, your website, sir, it's peterbreggin.com?
It's Breggin.com, BREGGIN.com.
Thank you so much for being with us.